The young imam's eyes narrowed as he looked at the tall black man in the worn gray tracksuit standing at the entrance of the Harlem Mosque. "I'm sorry, brother, but this is a house of worship. We have standards about how people present themselves." What he didn't know was he had just disrespected Muhammad Ali in front of Malcolm X, and what happened next would expose his prejudice in the most powerful way possible. They had no idea they were facing two of the most important voices of their generation, and this moment would become a legendary lesson about the true meaning of faith and respect. Before we dive into this incredible story of prejudice exposed in the most sacred place, let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. If you believe in treating every person with dignity and respect, regardless of how they look or dress, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that prove you should never judge a book by its cover. Now, let's get into what really happened when Muhammad Ali walked into that Harlem Mosque in 1964 and changed everything. It was a humid Friday afternoon in Harlem when Muhammad Ali finished his training session at the gym on 125th Street. He'd been training for 8 hours straight, and even though he'd showered, Ali kept on his comfortable gray tracksuit and worn sneakers. His mind was focused on one thing: making it to Friday prayer at the mosque on Malcolm X Boulevard. Ali had converted to Islam earlier that year, taking the name Muhammad Ali and leaving behind Cassius Clay, the name he called his slave name. The decision had cost him endorsements and earned him criticism from mainstream media. But for Ali, it wasn't about public opinion. It was about finding his true identity, about standing up for what he believed in. Islam had given him a sense of purpose, a connection to his heritage, and a community of brothers who supposedly saw past skin color and social status. The mosque on Malcolm X Boulevard was a modest building, a converted storefront with green curtains covering the windows and Arabic calligraphy painted above the door. Standing guard at the entrance was Imam Rashid, a man in his late 20s who had taken on the role of gatekeeper with intense devotion. Rashid wore an immaculate white thobe and a perfectly pressed kufi. In his mind, appearance was everything, and he'd made it his mission to ensure everyone entering the mosque met his standards. When Rashid saw Ali approaching in his tracksuit, his expression immediately soured. All he saw was someone who didn't fit his image of how a Muslim should look when coming to prayer. "I'm sorry, brother," Rashid said, his voice carrying authority, "but this is a house of worship. We have standards about how people present themselves. Perhaps you could come back when you're more appropriately dressed." Ali stopped, his expression unchanged. But if you looked closely, you might have noticed the slightest tightening around his eyes. This wasn't the first time Ali had faced judgment based on appearance, but he'd expected something different from his Muslim brothers. "Brother," Ali said calmly, his voice carrying that distinctive rhythm, "I've come to make salat. Prayer doesn't require expensive clothes, just a clean heart." Rashid crossed his arms defensively. "The Prophet, peace be upon him, taught us to present ourselves properly before Allah. You can't just show up in gym clothes. This isn't a rec center. This is a sacred space." Inside the mosque, about 30 men were already gathered, waiting for the Friday sermon. Among them was Malcolm X, who had arrived early and was sitting near the front, reviewing his notes. Malcolm had been asked to give the khutbah that day. He was dressed in his customary dark suit and bow tie, his appearance impeccable. Malcolm heard the voices at the entrance and looked up. Through the open door, he could see the confrontation unfolding, and something about the tall man in the tracksuit caught his attention. The graceful movement, the patient calm, the distinctive profile. Malcolm stood up immediately and walked toward the entrance, his expression shifting from curiosity to recognition to something approaching disbelief. But what was happening at that door was about more than just Muhammad Ali being denied entry. It was about a young man who had confused faith with formality, who had mistaken external appearance for internal devotion, and who was about to learn the hardest lesson of his life. Brother, Ali said again, his voice still calm, but carrying an edge. I understand you want to maintain respect for this space, but I've trained all day. I've showered. My clothes are clean, and I've come with sincere intention to worship Allah. Isn't that what matters? Rashid shook his head, convinced of his righteousness. If you were truly serious about your faith, you'd have changed into proper clothes. The fact that you're arguing about this tells me everything I need to know about your commitment to Islam. The words hung in the air like a slap. Ali remained perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back, his breathing steady. This was a man who had faced down Sonny Liston, who had stood before hostile crowds, won them over, with nothing but his words and unwavering conviction. A misguided young imam was just another opponent. That's when Malcolm X reached the door. Rashid, Malcolm's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Do you know who you're speaking to? Rashid turned to face Malcolm, his expression showing immediate deference. Malcolm X was a legend in the community, a man whose speeches had inspired thousands. If Malcolm X was speaking, Rashid would listen. Brother Malcolm, Rashid said quickly, I'm just maintaining the standards you've taught us. Dignity, respect, proper presentation. I taught you, Malcolm interrupted, his voice carrying absolute authority, that Islam sees no difference between a black man and a white man, between a rich man and a poor man, between a king and a pauper. I taught you that our faith is built on the equality of all believers before Allah, and yet here you are, turning away Muhammad Ali from the mosque because you don't approve of his clothes? Rashid's face went pale. Muhammad Ali? Malcolm stepped aside, gesturing to Ali, with an expression mixing warmth with disappointment. Yes, Rashid, this is Muhammad Ali, the heavyweight champion of the world, the man who gave up endorsements and faced death threats to embrace Islam, the man who changed his name and risked everything to stand up for what he believes in. And you just told him he's not serious about his faith because he came to prayer in a tracksuit. The silence that followed was deafening. Inside the mosque, several men had gathered at the door, drawn by the raised voices. They stared, in shock. Some recognized Ali immediately, their faces showing embarrassment and shame at what they'd just witnessed. Rashid looked from Malcolm to Ali, his certainty crumbling. His hands began to shake as the weight of his mistake settled on his shoulders. But here's what happened next that made this moment legendary. Instead of anger, Ali did something that would define his character more than any knockout. He placed a gentle hand on Rashid's shoulder and smiled. Brother Rashid, Ali said softly, you were trying to do what you thought was right. You were trying to protect this sacred space. I respect that, but Malcolm is right. Our faith doesn't judge people by their clothes or their status. Our faith looks at the heart, and if we start judging each other by appearance, we're no different from the society that judged us for the color of our skin. Rashid's eyes filled with tears. The shift from righteous authority to profound shame was visible on his face. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Malcolm X stepped forward, his expression serious. Rashid, this is the teaching moment we've been discussing. This is what happens when we confuse the external with the internal. Yes, the Prophet taught us to be clean and presentable, but he also taught us that Allah doesn't look at our bodies or our wealth. Allah looks at our hearts and our deeds. Ali nodded in agreement. Do you know what the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said? He said that an Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab. He said that a white person has no superiority over a black person. He said superiority comes from piety and good action, not from the clothes on our backs or the shoes on our feet. The men gathered at the entrance were completely silent, hanging on every word. This wasn't just about one incident. This was about a fundamental principle of their faith, being taught by two of the most important voices of their generation. Brother Rashid, Malcolm said, his voice taking on the rhythmic quality of a sermon. We left the churches of our oppressors because they preached equality, but practiced segregation. We embraced Islam because it promised true brotherhood. But if we bring the prejudices of American society into our mosques, if we judge our brothers by their appearance instead of their character, then we've learned nothing. Rashid finally found his voice, choked with emotion. Brother Muhammad, Brother Malcolm, I, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I let my own pride blind me to what faith actually is. Please forgive me. Ali embraced Rashid, shocking everyone watching. Here was the man who had been disrespected, offering forgiveness and brotherhood to the person who had wronged him. We all make mistakes, brother, Ali said. The question is what we learn from them. Today, you learned that faith isn't about appearance. It's about sincerity. It's about treating every person with dignity, regardless of how they look or where they come from. Malcolm X placed his hand on both men's shoulders. This is what I want to talk about in today's khutbah. This is the real Islam. Not the Islam of rules about clothes, but the Islam of justice, equality, and mercy. The Islam that sees a man's character, not his status. The men at the entrance began to applaud softly, understanding they had witnessed something profound. This wasn't just a celebrity getting special treatment. This was a living example of Islamic principles in action. As the group moved into the mosque for prayer, Ali walked beside Rashid, talking to him quietly about the journey of faith, about making mistakes and learning from them, about seeing past surface appearances to the heart of things. Malcolm watched them with satisfaction, knowing this moment would resonate far beyond this afternoon in Harlem. During the khutbah, Malcolm spoke about what had just happened. He didn't shame Rashid or use the incident to elevate Ali. Instead, he used it as a teaching moment for everyone present. Brothers, Malcolm said from the minbar, today we almost turned away Muhammad Ali from this mosque because he was wearing a tracksuit. Think about that. We almost denied entry to a man who gave up millions to embrace Islam, a man who faces death threats every day for standing up for his beliefs. And we almost turned him away because we didn't like his clothes. He paused, letting the weight sink in. But it's not just about Muhammad Ali. What if the next person in a tracksuit isn't famous? What if they're just a working man who came straight from his job? Are we going to turn them away too? Are we going to create a mosque for the well-dressed instead of a mosque for the faithful? After the prayer, men gathered around Ali and Malcolm, eager to speak with them. But Ali noticed that Rashid had slipped away to a corner, sitting alone with his head in his hands. While others celebrated the lesson learned, Rashid was still processing his mistake. Ali excused himself and walked over to Rashid, sitting down beside him. For a long moment, they sat in silence. Brother Rashid, Ali finally said, when I first became Muslim, I thought I had to change everything about myself. I thought I had to dress a certain way, talk a certain way to prove I was serious. But you know what I learned? Islam didn't ask me to become someone else. It asked me to become the best version of myself. It didn't ask me to judge others or create barriers. It asked me to build bridges. I was trying to protect this space, Rashid said quietly. I know, Ali replied, and that intention came from a good place. But sometimes our good intentions can lead us astray. Today, your intention to protect led you to exclude. Tomorrow, you can use that same intention to welcome. That's growth, brother. Malcolm X walked over to join them. He sat down, completing the circle. Rashid, the mistake you made today, I've made it too. Every one of us has. We've all judged someone based on appearance. The difference between wisdom and ignorance isn't whether you make mistakes. It's what you do after you realize you've made them. As the afternoon prayers concluded, and people left the mosque. Word of what had happened spread through the Harlem community. By evening, people were talking about the lesson taught at Malcolm X Boulevard, about Muhammad Ali being turned away and then using the moment to teach rather than condemn. In the weeks that followed, Rashid would become one of Ali's closest friends in the Muslim community. And whenever he told the story, he would emphasize not his mistake, but Ali's grace in response to it. Malcolm X would use the incident in speeches across the country, asking audiences, are we creating mosques that welcome all believers? Or are we creating exclusive clubs? Are we practicing the Islam of the Prophet Muhammad? Or are we practicing the Islam of our own limited imaginations? And Ali would carry the lesson throughout his life. Whenever he faced judgment based on appearance, he would remember that Friday afternoon in Harlem. He would remember that the best response to being judged isn't anger, but the quiet dignity of proving that character matters more than appearance. Years later, when Ali was battling Parkinson's and his speech had slowed, he would still tell this story. And the message would be the same: float like a butterfly through the prejudice, sting like a bee with the truth. But most importantly, remember that everyone deserves dignity and respect, regardless of how they look, because that's what champions do. They fight for justice, for equality, for the simple principle that every human being matters. And on that Friday afternoon in Harlem, Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X proved once again why they were both truly the greatest.